My name is Ted Hoover, and I am with PESAD Center, which is the nation's second oldest licensed counseling center working with the LGBTQ and HIV/AIDS population. We're 40 years old. Only Los Angeles has us beat by 4 months. So it's always kind of funny to me that we're second only to Los Angeles in anything. You know, and it's important to remember that back then, in the late 60s, early 70s, and certainly before then, when an LGBT individual would go to see a mental health professional with stress, the chances were pretty good that the therapist would say, you know, your problem is that you're gay. Let's get rid of the gay and the stress will, you'll be healthy then. So it was fairly revolutionary for Jim Huggins and the late Randy Forrester to say, no, that's not the problem. That's totally not the problem. So PESAD Center was founded. That in your little informational packets there, that the first brochure gives you kind of an overview of our services. We do individual and group counseling. We have a drug and alcohol rehab clinic. We domestic violence. We counsel domestic violence victims and perpetrators. Do a lot of youth outreach. We partner with the GLCC in Pittsburgh, which is the Gay Lesbian Community Center, and we have an after-school program in downtown Pittsburgh, plus we have a Friday night thing for the youth. We're now beginning to do outreach to LGBT seniors, which is a huge issue, as the population of Western Pennsylvania is, I believe, the fastest aging population in the United States. If we're not the top, we're certainly up there. And that's a big problem. We're seeing LGBT, seniors are isolated anyway. LGBT people are isolated, so senior LGBT people are exceedingly isolated. And we're seeing that when the LGBT go into assisted living facilities, for instance, they have to go back into the closet. Oftentimes these facilities are religiously run, plus there is a generational difference there. And we've had several reports of like the young people who work there spot the gay ones right away, and they start blackmailing them. You give me your watch, I out you in this facility, that kind of thing. It's a huge, and that's just a tiny, tiny, tiny tip of that problem. There is a nationwide organization called SAGE, which is a 50-year-old organization working with LGBT seniors. They have 16 affiliate sites around the country. We just became the 16th. So PESAD will start doing a lot more work with LGBT seniors in the area, like just 3 months old. And we've also started a new program called Street Outreach, which is, we'll get to this later in the thing, but depending on how you want to define gay and what percentage of the population is gay, I always just say 1 out of 10, because I went to public high school and I'm really bad at math, and 1 out of 10 is the number that I can do. So 1 out of 10, but some estimates go up to 40% of homeless, runaway, and throwaway youth are LGBT. We are extremely overrepresented in that population, extremely. Kids get thrown out when they come out to their parents, or they run away rather than come out to their parents. And then they're on the streets, and survival sex and drugs, and then the whole spiral. I still have to tell you. We have this new program called SOS, where we're going into the parks and under the bridges and connecting with these kids, trying to get them off the street, or if they're not ready to come in, at least keep them anchored to somebody, some organization that can help them. And then there's my program, which is Community Safe Zone, where I am working in the 5 counties that surround Allegheny County, which are Armstrong, Beaver, Butler, Washington, and Westmoreland. And I'm working to eliminate hate crime, and LGBT discrimination in southwestern Pennsylvania. So that's just something I can do on a Tuesday. So we've been doing a lot of work in, for instance, Westmoreland County, and with this man over here. A lot of really great things are happening out here. And we'll get to that later in the program. But part of that part of Safe Zone and my job is to partner with organizations. And we do this thing kind of tongue-in-cheek. We call it LGBT 101. It's context and vocabulary. A lot of times I think, we do a lot of work with the police or with law enforcement. You know, the only time they actually come into contact with the LGBT is in crisis situations. Nobody's good then. No one on either side of that equation is good. So we like to give them the tools that they can use when they do find themselves in that situation. And so people get tied up like, what word do I use? I don't want to offend anyone. And pretty soon it's so escalated. And, so that's what today is really about. It's just giving you some tools to help you in your job. So LGBTQ, take it away. Gay, all right? For the longest time, the word was homosexual, although not so long in a historical context. The word homosexual was really invented in the mid-1800s. And it's, in some cultures, and certainly pre-industrial cultures, homosexual was a verb, not a noun. Same with heterosexual. People weren't gay or straight. It was just the kind of sex they had, was gay or straight. And in various cultures, that can mean a lot of different things. There are cultures where if it's two men together and the man is the top, if that word plays here, he is not gay. It's the receiver. It's the passive partner in that is gay. And it's not as if that person who is the aggressor or the active partner is closeted. It's just how the culture defines what gay means. So when we say gay, we're talking about Western culture, same-sex attraction. Homosexual was the preferred term, and then in the 60s, the word gay, which has been around since the earliest recorded instance we can find it referring to same-sex attraction was in a poem, appropriately enough, by Gertrude Stein, where she uses the word gay. It was in 1922, and so we can tell that by 1922 she could use the word gay and be sure that her readers understood what she meant. No one really knows where it came from, why it became the word, but it was the word. And then in the 60s, gay became a word other than homosexual. Because when you say the word homosexual, well, a friend of mine says it sounds like a pair of shoes. I'll take a 9 in homosexual, please. Plus, people only hear the third syllable, homosex. When you say homosexual, that's all the people ever hear is homosexual. So that was one of the reasons that the word gay it doesn't sound very it's not scientific sounding, which homosexual is. So gay was the preferred term, but the changes that were happening in large society were also happening in the LGBT community, namely the invisibility of women. And in the 60s and 70s, when people said gay, and to this day, when people say gay, the first thing people think of is two men. Homophobia is always expresses itself about men. It's all men, 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 men. And part of our terror with homophobia is based in sexism. But as the women's movement in the larger culture gained ground, it happened in the LGBT community as well. So we added a letter. So it's lesbian and gay. And so we were the lesbian gay culture for a very long time. And then another group said, we're neither of those. So we added the bisexual. And in a lot of ways, the bisexuals really get dumped on by both the straight community and the gay community, who kind of see it as, I shouldn't repeat this joke, but on Will and Grace once, they referred to bisexuality as the rest stop on the highway to homo. A lot of gay people, when they come out when they're young, they have trouble saying I am gay, so what they do is they say I'm bisexual. And they mean it at the time, or not, but so a lot of gay people have at one point professed to being bisexual. But there are bisexuals. There are bisexual people. And they get a lot of crap. So anyway, so it became the lesbian, gay, bisexual community. And then we added transgender. And transgender, which we'll get to in a minute, is the one. That's the one that everyone slams on the brakes. It stops everyone dead in their tracks. It's a huge, huge issue. So we were the LGBT community. And you can be GLBT. There's not one preferred way. Lesbian or gay can go first. LGBT community. Another one. And recently, a new one is Q, for queer or questioning. Questioning is usually refers to kids, teenagers who are just beginning to understand their own sexuality. Queer is a big thing. Back in the, this here, that's a mouthful. I am a member of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community. By the time you get to the end of it, everyone's asleep. In the 90s, there was a movement in the late 80s and 90s to bring back the word queer, to defang it, as it were, and use it to refer to all of this, to the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. We were the queer community. And with the in-your-face activism of AIDS in the 80s and 90s, that was the word. But there was a lot of resistance to it. Older gay people, no matter how much you defang the word queer, they hear the word queer. And straight people have a lot of trouble. Straight people are very uncomfortable referring to gay people as queer. So that kind of fell away. The word queer kind of fell away. But the problem remains we still needed a word that meant all of this. And I see now that the word queer is making a comeback, especially among young kids with social networking and social media. I see it a lot more, and I have a feeling that's where we're going to end up as queer as the word, meaning all of this. And queer can mean all of that. It can mean a lot of other things. I know straight people who identify as queer. And queer in the sense of just kind of skewering perceptive notions of society. I'm queer. You're queer in the streets and straight in the sheets. That's how they refer to themselves. Next one.
So what does then? I'm sorry.
Okay.
So what does that mean though?
What does queer mean? Queer means all of this.
All of that.
All of that means lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and on some of the other more ones that I'm going to talk about. It just means we have kind of the Leave It to Beaver 1950s New Rochelle version of sexuality and gender. And then anyone who doesn't fit into that is part of the queer community. So we have some new letters now. We have I. Does anyone want to take a guess with the I? Oh, never mind.
Intersex.
Intersex. There you go.
How do you know?
Lot of studying.
Intersex used to be known as hermaphrodism. Ally is asexual, and H for HIV/AIDS. There's a group in Pittsburgh, plus there's P for pansexual and M for monosexual. They just keep adding all these letters. We're going to get all 26 of them soon. There's a group in Pittsburgh of really young, radical, queer kids, and they are, if you rearrange these letters and some of the other ones that they've added, it spells quilt bag. I'm like, I don't think you should really spend a lot of time trying to put quilt bag across instead of queer, for instance, because I don't think anyone's going to say, hi, I'm a member of the quilt bag community. So there we go. Next one. So that is the words, just the vocabulary. Let's get into transgender, because this is the one. And on the subject of trans, people never know what to call trans, except transgender people. And it's transgender, not transgendered, which I called transgendered for a very long time. Trans is a very safe word.
Can you just repeat what you just said? It's what?
It's transgender, not transgendered. I thought it was transgendered. It's transgender. And that's anyone who's transitioning from male to female, female to male. Trans is a good word. Tranny is not a good word. And transsexual. One of the reasons that transgender is so confusing to people because it's a specific thing and it's a whole category. So transgender is anyone who, the transgender community are people who queer the notion of gender. So that can be like a transvestite, who are mostly straight men, who dress in clothing of the women's gender for sometimes emotional reasons, sexual reasons. Mostly those are mostly straight. Then there are drag kings and drag queens. And there's always an element of entertainment in that. Everything's over the top. Everything's very big. It's the boas and you know, the mantillas and the high heels, or for the women who are drag kings, you know, really kind of butch, like leather and denim and chains and things. And usually, not always, but usually there's money involved too. They're paid the performers. That's what a drag king or drag queen is. And then there's the transgender, who used to be known as transsexual. And those are people who are transitioning from one gender to another. So that person is transgender, but then all of those people together are the transgender community. So it gets a little confusing with that part, okay? In other words, you hear, one thing I hear a lot now is called gender queer. That's something the kids are using a lot, that expression, gender queer. Cool. So let's talk about this issue. If you want to pass those around. And if you want to do me a favor, above the word sexuality paradigm, right above that word, fold it in half, okay? So right above where you see the word sexuality paradigm, fold it. So on one side you have gender paradigm, on the other side you have sexuality paradigm. The most important thing to get out of this is there's no black and white. You know, we live in such a binary world. 0 or 1, yes or no, white or black. And that's not the human experience. The human experience is not yes or no, white or black, check one, check one. It is a continuum. So let's talk about gender and the gender continuum. Look at this. Place yourself on this, going from the most, who is the most femme, the girliest girl movie star that you can think of, physically? I mean, just total girl. Marilyn Monroe. Exactly. That's the one that everybody says, Marilyn Monroe.
I was thinking Lady Gaga.
I was thinking Rick, but...
I don't even think Lady Gaga's on this. And who's the butchest, the most masculine? The guyest guy.
Brad Pitt.
Physically. We get a lot of Arnold Schwarzeneggers. And we get a lot of John Waynes. Just guy, like really guy. And that's not everybody, physically. You know, where are you on this? You know, put it, you know, in your mind, on your sheet of paper. You know, put it down. Where do you fall on this continuum? Where do 3 of your friends fall on that continuum? That's your biological gender when you're born. Now, the intersex community is right in the middle, who often have parts, sexual organs of the opposite gender or incomplete sexual organs of their own gender. But we're all in there, and that's how you're born. This is a fact. But from that, we then move into gender role. And you know, what's the first thing you ask someone when they tell you you're pregnant? What's the first thing people will ask someone who says they're pregnant? Are you married? You must know my grandmother.
What's the sex?
Yeah, is it a boy or a girl? Is it a boy or a girl? And if it's a boy, what do you do?
Buying blue stuff.
Buy blue stuff. What kind of toys do you buy a girl?
Barbies.
Exactly. So we already take this and we start moving it into this immediately. You're not even down the chute, and already you have all these expectations. So you can think about really kind of girly girl gender roles and boy gender roles, and you know, the kind of jobs they get. And we have girls' bikes and boys' bikes, and girls' underwears and boys' underwear, and girls' basketball and boys' basketball. Every time you fill out a form, check one, male or female. It's never that. It's never check one. It's always a continuum. And so think of, there's the stereotypical gender roles, and think of on this line where you are in relation to those stereotypes. How much do you conform to them or don't? And stereotype might be the wrong word because it's negative. You might be a guy because you're a guy. That's fine. That's how you are, as long as that's what you want to be. So then we get into gender identity. And this is how you present to the world. This is an I word. This is an I statement. This is what I am. And the way to talk about this is to go back to the intersex community. Back in the bad old day, if a kid was born intersex, the doctor would make a decision right then. Boy or girl, snip or whatever. Oftentimes not even telling the parent, never telling the kid. And the doctor had a 50% chance of getting it right. There's a book called My Name is David about a kid who was born a boy, and during circumcision, there was an accident, and he lost his penis. And the doctor talked to the parents and said, you should raise this child as a girl. And they did. And the kid fought against it. And the kid never knew, but the kid fought against it his entire life. And then, I think just before he was 20, his parents told him and that he had been a boy, that he had been born a boy. He always knew. He wrote this book. He ended up killing himself in his late 30s. A woman that I'm working with in Washington County, her grandson, who's 4 years old, spends most of the day trying to pull his penis off. He's really seriously hurt himself. It's what you know, and there's no other way. I can't quantify it. I don't have, there's no tech. What you know. It's, we can get into, there's a discussion of how the brain is sexed in this 6 months of gestation, and how, all these kind of things, but you just know. And we fight again. What amazes me, transgender people, and especially, God bless him, Chaz Bono, and the hatred that is just spewed. And it's just a phase. That was just a phase. You go through all of that because, I wake up today. I'm going to make my life a living hell for the next couple of years. So it's I am this. My identity is this thing. And where on this, I'm a guy. I know I'm a guy. There's never a second in my mind that I am not a guy inside and outside. So you put your dot on that line. Now you draw a line connecting those three dots. And most people's will be, whatever. It's when the dots go awry. When your biological gender dot is here and your gender identity dot is there. The more crooked that line is, that's what we call gender stress. And that's when people start seeking help. And there's a lot of, transgender is a continuum as well. There's, I'm a guy. I was born a guy, but I am a woman inside, and I want my outside to reflect my inside. So I take vocal classes to learn how to raise the pitch of my voice, to speak in a more feminine manner. I can start dressing in women's clothing on the weekends, all through the week. I can start taking hormones. I can have what's known as top surgery, or I can have bottom surgery as well. This whole transition, this is a whole paradigm, this is a whole continuum in itself. And most transgender people never go this far. A lot of people just don't want to be cut up. They just don't like hospitals. They don't. Also, it's extremely expensive. And most insurance doesn't cover it. They consider it to be cosmetic. So transgender really, and because it pushes our two buttons, it pushes sex. You say sex in America. my grandmother, for instance. And gender, which is the hottest of the hot button issues. The transgender community is so misunderstood and has been the object of, when they're even noticed, just unbelievable ridicule and scorn. I am happy to say that I see that changing. I definitely see, at least it's in the conversation now. I mean, we've got a long, long way to go for the transgender people, but at least it's beginning. This one. So this one's fairly self-explanatory, the same thing. Your sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is really, you're walking down the Rite Aid aisle, down the aisle in the Rite Aid, and someone walks by you and you go, that, is your sexual orientation. That's all. It's just that. And where is your the famous, notorious Kinsey scale, which I have an endless list of problems with. But, 1 through 6, the Kinsey 1 through 6. 1, you only have sex with people of the opposite gender. And 6, you only have sex with people of the same gender. And how many variations there are. And how few 1 and 6s there are. How few 1 and 6s. So, here's the Kinsey 6. Here's the Kinsey 1 down there. And this is not even sexual behavior we're talking about. This is just, I am, for instance, mostly over here. I'm a little disturbed by how attracted I am to Rachel Maddow. So that kind of pulls me over here a little bit. But then I hear George Clooney's left his girlfriend. I'm over here. So, it's, again, black or white, yes or no, 1, 0 or 1, binary. We're all in here. All in here. And this can change through your lifetime, too. I mean, you can be, that dot is constantly moving. So then we have sexual behavior, which is where you act on your And, people whose is here, their behavior may be here for reasons that you can, figure out. Society is what society is and says what it says. Here's the one that always... Sometimes all your are here, but you don't do anything here. Your behavior is nowhere in here. Can anyone think why? Because you don't have sex before you're married. No one ever gets that. It's so funny to me. How far we've come as a culture. And actually, I did this once, and a nun was like, that's why I don't do it, because I'm a nun. So, there's all kinds of different reasons that you do or don't act on your sexual orientation. And, I think it's fair to say, even if I did meet Rachel Maddow, to be perfectly, oh God, I don't think I've ever told anyone. Back in the 80s and the 70s especially, it was the 70s, it was some good times there. And I certainly had sexual relations with women, but it became very complicated because I knew that I was gay. They knew I was gay too. I never lied to anyone about it. But I knew that it was, for me, it was just sex. It was just behavior. But there was no, and I stopped having sex with them, even if I found them attractive, because I knew that I was hurting them in a lot of ways. I was stepping into something that meant more to them than it did to me, and I couldn't live with that. So, and I think that might be true for heterosexual people too, who may every now and again have a but they just don't. It's like, okay, it's there, but I'm not acting on it. And then we get down to sexual identity, which is the same as the gender identity. And this is I am. This is the I am statement. And I am gay. Although don't tell Persa, will fire me. So, and it's the same thing. Where is your dot? Where is your dot along this line? What do you identify as? And again, the famous, closeted sexual orientation is here. Sexual behavior is here. Sexual identity is here. That crooked line. And that's called what we call in the closet. And the reason that I wanted you to fold this in half, and this is quite important, is that this has nothing to do with this. Gender has nothing to do with sexuality. And so you can have, so Chaz Bono, when Chaz was presenting as a woman, Chaz was dating a woman and defined herself as a lesbian. So now Chaz is a man and dating a woman, and he is a straight man. But his girlfriend defines herself as a lesbian. Ow, ow, ow. It was so much easier in the Brady Bunch. But the one has nothing to do with the other. We see, and because we as a culture conflate sexuality and gender. So we see a femi man. We see a man who acts a little swish. Because he's acting feminine, we immediately go to, he's gay. That's the first place that we go to as a culture, and that's completely wrong. So that's a lot of gobbledygook. Anyone have any questions at this point? Just don't talk about my hair. That's all I ask. Okay. So this is what we call the triple threat. And this is about the context in which LGBT people live and the context in which LGBT youth develop and live. There's three things that work against us. Let's see the first one. Heterosexism. Who knows what heterosexism means? Okay. It means that we assume hetero is the norm. Hetero is the normal. That everybody is heterosexual. Now, most people are heterosexual. I mean, just statistically, there's more straight people than there are gay people. So some of that's understandable. It's when you get into the ism. The ism is the kind of says, oh, something's wrong here. Something's a little creepy. And that's where you deliberately pull the gay out of the culture. I never learned once. I never had if 10% of the population is gay, 10% of the writers are gay, probably more. Growing up in school, I never learned this stuff. I never learned about the private lives of gay authors. I often heard about the private lives of the straight authors, but never the gay authors. Completely taken out of the culture. That's especially if you follow, movies in the 40s and 50s, and when they would adapt Broadway plays or novels to movies, and often they were gay characters, they would totally take the gay out when they made the movie. Totally. It's oftentimes when they made the movie A Cat on a Hudson Roof, they took the fact that Brick was gay out, and the movie made no sense. I'm like, what the hell's going on? But that is the assumption that everyone is heterosexual and blindness or invisibility. I grew up in in the early 60s. And I literally thought, I grew up in a kind of, Pittsburgh neighborhood. In Pittsburgh, you're born and die in the same neighborhood. You never go outside of the neighborhood. But I grew up literally believing I was the only gay person in the world. I literally thought I was the only gay person. And I didn't know certainly didn't know the word gay or what that meant, but I thought that I was that only person. And also that I couldn't tell anybody. And this was before I started kindergarten. I knew this. I so clearly remember this. I thought I was the only one because I saw nothing. And it's kids today who are like, am I this thing? And they look for a reflection in the culture, and there's nothing. They get nothing back. So that's heterosexism. Next one is homophobia, also transphobia. And you've heard this word a lot. Can you take a guess at this? No? Well, homophobia literally translated would be fear of gay people, but we don't actually see it manifest itself as fear. Usually it's disgust or contempt. Like when I walk down the street and I pass a bunch of teenage boys, I don't think they're going to go, "Oh, I'm afraid of him." That's not my concern if they're afraid of me. So homophobia puts the gay back in and then puts the negative spin on it. And this is where all the negative attitudes come in. Negative attitudes, attributes placed on LGBT people, both invisible, bad. So this takes it out, this puts it in. This is the gay people or pedophiles that we recruit, that like for bisexuals, that they will have sex with anything at any time ever. In the ambulance on the way to the hospital, they'll hit up the nurse and the driver. My favorite one is that gay people have more money. That we're richer. We have a larger discretionary income. I love that one because I got on the wrong gay bus. I got on the poor gay bus. I didn't get on the rich gay bus. So this takes it out of the culture. This puts it back in. To go back to my story of my pathetic childhood. When I was 10, my mother went back to school to become a nurse, an LPN. And I knew if I looked in the back of her nursing books under homosexuality, it would say, see mental deviation, see mental perversion. That's what I was told. So the only time I did see myself reflected in the culture was in a negative way. There's a ton of movies that were made in the 60s where the gay people killed themselves in the final reel. That's what I got. That was the reflection I got back. So you can't live in this kind of system without getting some of it on you. You carry some of this through.
Hey, Ted.
Yes.
One night I was driving home from here, and ran across this show, and I think it was probably a more right-wing religious group. And what I respected is that the focus was on, LGBTQs, and they actually had a woman who identified herself as lesbian. They were, doing phone interviews. I thought that was courageous of her and interesting for them. But very interesting, and she was really wonderful. So one of the callers had said, well, I'm concerned about promoting LGBTQs because of how that will affect the sacred bond of marriage. And her comment was, marriages dissolving or decreasing or divorcing has absolutely nothing to do with LGBTQs. And that's an example of this, that, it's yet just another almost dumping ground.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the irony, the Defense of Marriage Act was signed by Bill Clinton. While he was signing it in the Oval Office, who else knows what was going on? So, Newt Gingrich has made a career out of condemning gay marriage. He's on his fourth wife. He divorced his second when she was laying in the hospital with dying of cancer. Lindsay Lohan can get married. I can't. Hello. Yeah, I mean, and that to me is my own personal thing about. I mean, the hypocrisy of it is just what just chokes me. Let's just at least be honest. Just. Ugh. So we take all this negative stuff and we take it on board. We can take that's internalized homophobia, also known as self-loathing. And this is what you battle. This is what we all battle. Taking in the negative messages. I believe that coming out is not an event. It's a process. I believe it's a lifelong process. And I believe that coming out is the process of getting rid of this stuff. And that's why it takes forever to do. And, to this day, in certain situations, I'll butch it up. First of all, who the hell am I kidding? If you can't tell I'm gay, Jesus. But I get closeted. I get out of nowhere. I get closeted, and I sometimes we talk a lot about just casual homophobia and what that's like when people. I've had so many gay people, friends of mine, say they'll know people, will hang out with people, and then just one day that person will say, "Oh, that's so gay," right in front of a gay person, and people don't even connect that. People don't. So anyway, but it's a process. It's a long, long process of getting rid of this internalized homophobia, and there are consequences to this. And this is the disparities for LGBT people. And it's important to know, and I know you understand this, but it's essential that I say it. These things aren't because people are gay. These things are because they live in a culture that negates them. 3 to 4 times higher rate of suicide. 40% depression rate in males. 4 times higher rate of smoking. I just started smoking again because I started hanging out in Westmoreland County where everybody smokes. I quit for 3 years. We talked about this figure before. This is incredible. When the right wing says, "Oh, well, gays threaten the family unit." No, this is, if you love your family or you don't love your family. A friend of mine had a woman who was quite obviously a lesbian, and everyone knew it, but she never said anything. And her sister had died many, many years earlier. Her sister had killed herself. And so everyone kind of thought that this woman didn't want to come out to her family because they were still traumatized. So, but eventually this woman said to my friend, "Oh, I'm coming out to you. I'm telling you now that I am gay." And my friend's like, "Oh, that's great, whatever." We always kind of figured, why did it take so long? And she said that years ago she had told her family that she was gay. And her father said to her, "You know what? Your sister made the better choice." Now, I can't even imagine how you could say that to a kid. I can't. Anyway, so that's that. 25% of us are less likely to go to the doctor. And 63% of us are not out to our primary care physician. One thing that gay people are very good at doing, we learn it at a very early age, is putting on a mask. That's what we do, especially when we feel vulnerable. Up go the shields, like on the Millennium Falcon, and we are impervious when we feel threatened. We put on a face. And anybody who's going to the doctor is automatically feeling vulnerable. So we never come out, and there are health disparities between gay and straight, especially among straight women and gay women. Women tend to get into the healthcare system through their husband's health plans, or because of prenatal care. These aren't necessarily major issues for all lesbians. And breast cancer, it's unbelievable, the difference. But if the doctor doesn't know to look for it, the doctor can't do anything when you're not out. 70% report high-risk behavior STD transmission. Really interesting compared to 9%. Really interesting thing, the Center for Disease Control put out a study this summer of LGBT youth and unsafe behaviors, and for smoking, drinking, unprotected sex. For LGBT kids, the number is so much higher. Even gay kids don't wear safety belts as much as straight kids do. It's just a series of bad choices. And bad choices because of the issues we talked about. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. 41% of transgenders attempt suicide. Unemployment is a huge issue for this community. Poverty is a huge, huge issue. Rejection by everyone, not just family, but friends, everybody. It's a huge, I really think this is going to be the big issue of the next couple of decades. It's unbelievable because it just hits every single button that we have. Let's talk about legal issues. 70% of the LGBT Pennsylvanians live without any legal protection, local, state, or federal. It is legal to fire someone who is LGBT or perceived to be LGBT. It is legal to not rent to or to evict someone who is LGBT, and it is legal to deny public accommodation to someone who is LGBT. I can go to a Pizza Hut in Greensburg, and the manager can come over to me and say, "You know what? We really don't like gay people in our restaurant. I'm sorry, you'll have to leave." I have no legal recourse whatsoever. I can be fired from my job. I cannot be hired, and they can tell me that I'm sorry, we'd love to hire you, but you're gay. We don't like to have gay people work here. Oh, we just found out you're gay. I'm sorry, you have to quit. Kicked out of an apartment, not having a rented to, waiting for the Westmoreland County Transit bus. They can drive by me. Oh, we don't want gay people on this bus. And I have no legal recourse. And that is true for 70% of the LGBT people in Pennsylvania. So we have protection in Allegheny County and in Pittsburgh. We have it in Erie, Philadelphia, the ones you'd figure, Harrisburg, State College, Wilkes-Barre, some down here, York, I think, and Lancaster. And that's it. 70% of Pennsylvanians live without any. We don't have it locally. You certainly don't have it in Greensburg. You don't have it in Westmoreland County. You don't have it in Pennsylvania, and you don't have it in the United States. We do not have legal protection. That's the one where people's mouths always fall open when I get to that slide. Okay, let's go back. And talk about a big thing, and this is in your little hymnals there. Another part of my job has been working with law enforcement. So you'll see the one that says, have you been the victim of a hate crime? I just want to talk for a second about crime and hate crime. When we talk about hate crime is really just penalty enhancement. If Rick would beat me up, and you know he wants to, but if he beats me up, he gets a year in prison. If he beats me up and calls me a fag while he's doing it, he gets a year and 6 months. That 6 months is what hate crime legislation is. It's just penalty enhancement. And there is no such thing as a hate crime without an underlying crime. You can't, if somebody calls somebody a fag, that's not a hate crime. That's a hate incident, but it's not a hate crime, it's not prosecutable. In Pennsylvania, in 1982, the Commonwealth passed the PA Ethnic Intimidation Act, which kind of codified a bunch of different rules, but made protected classes as regards hate crime, race, religion, and national origin. Those were the 3 protected categories in Pennsylvania. And that was the law until 2002, when they added gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, a couple others I can't ever remember. I always look it up and then I always forget it. And that was passed in 2002, though, so that was amended to include that, and that was for 5 years, that was the law. And then in 2007, a political group toward the right wing of the spectrum challenged that in court and said that the law had been improperly amended according to Pennsylvania's charter. And the judge agreed. So it was on technicality, he agreed. And all of that stuff that was added in 2002 was taken away. So we were back to race, religion, and national origin were the protected classes in Pennsylvania. So I don't know if you remember, but a couple of years ago in Bridgeville, right outside of Pittsburgh, that guy went into that fitness studio and shot and killed those women. That could not be classified as a hate crime because gender is not a protected class in Pennsylvania. So we had no protection for hate crime until 2009, when President Obama signed the Matthew Shepard James Byrd Act. Matthew Shepard, of course, was the young student from Laramie, Wyoming, who was tortured enough to hang on that fence for a couple of days. And James Byrd was an African-American man in Texas who was tied to the back of a truck and dragged through town. So the Matthew Shepard James Byrd Act now, in 2009, makes LGBT hate crime a federal issue. The FBI investigates and turns it over to the Department of Justice to prosecute. It's far from a perfect law. There's all these weird kind of triggers it has to trip to come in, the crime has to trip to, but it is a law, at least. It is a law. It is some protection. But the point, too, is, like I said, a hate crime can't be a crime. A hate crime is only a hate crime if there's an underlying crime. So even if you can't go after that extra 6 months, you can still get them for the year. And that's a problem that our community has. We so underreport We never report the crimes that are done to us. I've read almost up to 2/3 or twice as many crimes happen to us than we ever report. For many reasons. Often we're in the closet. Some kids sit outside a gay bar and wait for the gay bar to close at 2 and then start beating up the patrons as they come out. A lot of those men are closeted, and they can't go to the police and say, I was beaten up because I was gay, because that means it'd have to come out. Oftentimes we don't report the crime because of that whole internalized homophobia. This is what I get. This is what I'm gay. I don't know if anyone here is old enough to remember a movie called Midnight Cowboy, which was the first movie to win an Academy Award with an X rating in 1970. John Voight played a male hustler, although he's not a woman, but there was a scene where a guy tries to pick him up in a bathroom and he just kicks the shit out of this guy. Just threw around the bathroom. He's kicking him and punching him. And the whole time the guy is saying, I deserve this, I deserve this, I deserve this. That is what internalized homophobia looks like. So we don't report these crimes because we feel... Oftentimes we never report the crimes because we turn to our community first. We had a case, you might have seen some of it on YouTube, maybe about a month ago. 2 young women, lesbians, were walking through Bloomfield in Pittsburgh, and 3 guys came up to them and put a gun to one's face and called him fucking dyke. And in the middle of Liberty Avenue in Bloomfield, she called activists, and they had a protest the next day where 5 of them got arrested. So the story became about the protest and not about what was done to them. They never went to the police. She never reported the crime. She did not report the crime to the police.
Hey, Ted. I have a client here, and there was kind of like evolving interpersonal violence between her and her partner. And so we processed like what her options were. And they live in Allegheny County, so she went to Allegheny County and got a PFA, and then took it to law enforcement in her community, which was Wilkinsburg, and they laughed. They didn't even serve it. And so she was devastated. And actually I gave her PESAD's phone number to call to try to get some advocacy on that issue. So it was in this case it was the system which was designed to protect did not.
Well, I mean, in that particular instance, a friend of mine runs the PFA program. All she has to do is call back the PFA and tell them that the police are doing their job.
Okay.
And that's, as I do a lot of work with the FBI, and as they always say, everybody has a boss. Everybody has a boss, and if you're not getting the treatment that professional, respectful, courteous treatment, you have to speak to a supervisor. I mean, that's another reason that we don't report, because the relationship between the LGBT and law enforcement has historically been really awful. I mean, when we celebrate, back in the 40s and 50s and 60s, when police or politicians wanted to look tough on crime, they'd shut down the gay bars. They'd raid the gay bars. They would literally load a paddy wagon up in front of the door, and they would just have the people walk from the bar end of the paddy wagon, arrest them, and then publish their names in the papers the next day, and then there'd be all kinds of suicides from that publication of their names. That was just standard practice. In '69, at the Stonewall Bar in Manhattan, for the first time the patrons fought back and got the police barricaded in the bar and tried to set the bar on fire. And that was the Stonewall Uprising, and that's what we celebrate with Gay Pride. And when I do this presentation to the police and I tell them that's what we're celebrating at Gay Pride, the room gets awful chilly. And I think it's a bunch of people with guns pointing right at me. So we have a very, very bad relationship with the police, and that's why I don't report. But I have to say, and it's essential for me to say this as I work with law enforcement, I haven't met one who hasn't wanted what I want, which is a safe community. And it's interesting, and kind of along that lines, we do a lot of training with teachers and bullying, which is such a big thing now. And often, kids expect other kids to be bad. I mean, or when other kids are bad to them, it's like, because kids are evil and kids know that they're evil. It's when there's an adult in the room who turns away from it. That's what makes the kid feel unsafe. And when we work with teachers, we find like if they see some kid gay bullying another kid, they hesitate because they don't want to get into this big philosophical discussion, or they feel like they have to do education on gay issues. That's not what we say to teachers. You say, my classroom is safe for everybody. I don't want to get into why it's not important to me. Everybody is treated with respect in my classroom. And teachers, that's what teachers can grab onto. They don't have to get into, well, Tchaikovsky was gay, and gay people are good, and you shouldn't. Everybody is safe in my classroom. And in my work with the police, that's the same way we are. We're like, when you're not in uniform, we don't care. I don't care whether you like gay people or not. When I'm not on my job, I don't know how I feel about police officers. But when I'm here, when you're here in this job, you leave your bias. You leave your bias. And that's true for therapists, too. We were doing a presentation in Beaver, and some therapist, and God bless her for, having this strength to stand. She said, well, I'm very Christian, and I don't believe that gay people, I believe that gay people are sinners. And if I have a client who is gay, how do I square that with my religion? I'm an old lefty, so it's like, how do you, there's so many issues there. But someone said, well, for very Christian people, divorce is a sin. So are you going to tell a patient who's being beaten by their husband that they can't get divorced? Because you leave your bias outside. You leave your bias outside the room. And also, if you're going to, you don't want your clients to be smarter than you on these issues. You don't want them to know more about this than you do, so they're educating you. That's really never a place you want to be as a therapist, where your client is educating you. So that's what a lot of this is about. And we'll do the next slide. PESAD Center and me, this is me, but that number's on the back of the purple brochure. And you just call that number. I'd like to think of myself as the concierge for Western Pennsylvania's gay and lesbian community. And if you need something, if I don't know it, I'll probably know someone who does know it. Several things are happening in Westmoreland County. Of all my 5 counties, I'm working in Armstrong, Beaver, Butler, Washington, and Westmoreland. And I'm barely hanging on to Westmoreland. There's so much going on here. There's just so much going on because of that man over there. Who is the reason I look as haggard as I do. I spend a lot of time driving out here, so I have a lot of time to think in the car. And why is Westmoreland because it's so big geographically, for one. Greensburg is its own city. I mean, it's its own, I'm from Pittsburgh, and I have to confess that before I started this job, I was like, Greensburg, well, that's a suburb of Pittsburgh, isn't it? No, of course it isn't. But that's how I used to think. And now I'm here, and it's a city. It's its own city. It has its own identity. And you have 4 colleges here. And that makes a huge difference to the tenor because, I also try to do stuff in Armstrong County. There ain't nothing going on in Armstrong. And partly because the only colleges they have are just commuter campuses, satellite campuses, like IUP and some other schools. So there's all this stuff, and last year I got a call from some guy named Rick Marcelli, who was responding to a call he had got from a guidance counselor in a local school district who had a bunch of LGBT kids who were having a hard time. And that led to a meeting, which led to another meeting, which led to another meeting, which led to another meeting. And out of that, we've been kind of collecting souls. We've been amassing people. And a couple of things we have, you'll see the kind of yellow and blue folder is the Westmoreland LGBT Interfaith Network. And that's a collection of welcoming and affirming pastors, congregation, and laity in the Westmoreland County area. A huge part of my job, when I started this job, I thought, I'm going to go help the gays. And now I realize I'm going to help the straights is what I really do. It's a lot of what I do is allies. This started, the Interfaith Network started because there were people of faith who did not agree with what was being said in their name. This hate that is spewed by some religious people. And these people of faith were like, no, that is not what I believe. And didn't really maybe you know, they had to come out. Allies have to come out as an ally to the gay and lesbian community. So they can stand up in the pew and say, no, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with this hate. And, you know, even outside of the whole spirituality thing, just straight people who were in a group with a bunch of straight people and somebody says it makes a fag joke. And for the straight person to say, you know what, that's not funny. I don't think that's a huge act of courage. That is a huge act of courage. And that's one of the things that I'm working on with a lot of other people. I have to say that most of the people that I work with are straight. Like, I sit in this pastors group. I have a long history of being a non-believer. Damien and the Omen, basically, is who I was as a kid. And I sit in a room with like 14 straight pastors, and I just think, oh God, my head's going to start spinning. I'm pea soup's going to come shooting out of my mouth. And I'm so touched by these people. I'm so touched by these people, and see that what calls them to their faith is the same thing that calls them towards social justice. And that's a really great thing. And that's where we come together on that point and work for that end. And so the LGBT community is mostly sort of a behind. I mean, we're not a very public, we don't do a lot of events. It's about pastoral care and outreach for people who are in crisis. And we do, we've had 2 interfaith worship services, public interfaith worship services. One in Irwin in May, and then we just had one last week at the Trinity UCC in downtown Greensburg. That was, last week was coming out week. And we based around this thing called Shower of Stoles, which is a project. People donate stoles and other liturgical garments for clergy who cannot be out in their house of worships. And so they donate stoles in their name. It's almost kind of like the AIDS Club. It's kind of that sort of project. And they have over 1,000 stoles now. And you can call and they'll send you some. We had a display, and they come with the story cards. It was unbelievably moving. And kind of as a side note, a man named Scott Anderson was a Presbyterian minister and came out several years ago and was kicked out of the Presbyterian church. The Presbyterians just voted earlier in the summer to allow gay ordination of gay people in relationships.